Children in the Bible, Proverbs 17 and verse 6, children are the crown of the aged, and the glory of children is their fathers. So you think about grandchildren. As I said, I don't know how old I'm supposed to be, but I've been a grandparent for 20 years. And so I don't know if I find that aged point or not. I don't like to think of that term, but it's a truism, as many of the Proverbs are. And it is a great blessing to have grandchildren. And it's also an interesting that the glory of children is their fathers. You've seen children wear their parents' shoes, and the shoes are way too big, but they have fun. You see children playing dress up. You see children that do exactly as they perceive their fathers or their mothers doing. Sometimes that's a little bit frightening because children follow their parents when they're real young. They imitate their parents. And if their parents are ugly with each other, children tend to talk that same way. And a little bit of word of caution as well as warning in that passage. Children imitate their parents. And see if I better not try to go back one or I'll end up knocking it. But children in the Bible, John 16, verse 21, a woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy. The child is born into the world. There's been pain in childbirth since the days of Adam and Eve and sin in the garden. But God did not take away the joy of having children, and we thank God that He did not. Children in the Bible, about 700 years before Jesus, Isaiah said, all your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great peace shall be the peace of your children. So all the way back in the days of Isaiah, 740 to 690 BC, the wise people of God were inspired to talk about children and the need to be taught by the Lord. And of course, we are children of God as well, and we are taught by the Lord by Isaiah and others. I'm going to look briefly at 10 incredible children in the Bible. We're not going to read all these passages, so you won't miss lunch. But you think about him, David was one of the great ones. He was a faithful shepherd. Long before he killed Goliath, or before he became the great king or the psalmist, he was a faithful shepherd. Long, tedious work. He began as a child. He was an obedient son. He loved his father Jesse. We know of him as a great warrior of faith as a young man when he took on Goliath. And still today, people, when they want to use the great upset, it's David defeats Goliath. In fact, one of the companies now has a listing of the great upsets in history. And one of the great upsets in history, as they're doing their commercial, is David going against Goliath. And they show the percentages. And it wasn't a very high percentage of David defeating Goliath, but he had faith in the great God of heaven. 2 Kings chapter 5 is a young lady that we don't even know her name. She was a slave girl, and a Hebrew slave girl. She was living among foreigners, and her faith in God was shared with her master Naaman. And Naaman found healing through God. And so an unknown Hebrew girl had a great impact. And you know something significant about that? Naaman the Syrian was a foreigner. He was a heathen, though a good man by heathen standards. But he also is one who went before the greatest church, or one of the greatest two churches of the first century. Likely was Antioch of Syria. All these years before, God cared about the Syrians. And this maid girl opened the door to this Syrian obeying the gospel, who many years later, the church at Antioch of Syria sent out Paul and Barnabas with the instruction of the Holy Spirit. And Paul and Silas later to do the work of God and spread the gospel over the Mediterranean world. Daniel was a great child of God. He was taken into captivity along with others when he was young. And I was doing a little reading this week, and I always pictured Daniel as a teenager. Some picture, based on the customs of the time and who they took into captivity, him being as young as 8 years of age. And as a young child, or maybe a young teenager, he had enough faith in God to refuse the king's food that was not a part of their religion and their culture. Can you imagine an 8-year-old or a 17-year-old, for that matter, having enough faith to stand against the most powerful people in the world that had led his people into captivity? Daniel was a young man of prayer. He became a mature man of prayer. He became one of the great leaders of the world of his generation. He foretold of the Messiah and the Messiah's kingdom. But it started when he was a child and he had faith in God. The Bible class, I mentioned John 6, about a young boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish who shared his lunch with Jesus. In fact, he gave his lunch to Jesus, and Jesus fed 5,000 people. Jesus was a great teacher. It's interesting that Jesus had the ability and the willingness with his disciples to seek out this young child and his lunch to perform one of his greatest miracles. The boy with loaves and fish had faith in Jesus and gave him his lunch.